Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hi, welcome to Economics. Late last month, there was a controversy involving Baba Ramdev's Patanjali Ayurveda when they advertised or launched a drug called Coronil saying it would cure coronavirus or COVID-19. The government got back and said, you cannot advertise it like that. We have not given you permission for this. And then Patanjali Ayurveda said, this is not a treatment. This is something that will help build immunity. It's an immunity booster. And there was a lot of toing and froing between the government and Patanjali. And finally, there were some changes made to how Coronil or the Coronil kit is advertised and sold. Why are we talking about this development 2 or 3 weeks later, and especially on an economics show discussing an Ayurvedic drug? Because Ayurveda is playing a very key role as an alternative system of medicine, and it is not just about medicine. Our show focuses on the economics, and there is a huge economic implication and economics angle to Ayurveda, especially at a time when the world is looking for a cure, looking for vaccines for the coronavirus pandemic. So, Ila, why are we talking about Ayurveda today and its implications for India and Indian business?
See, there's a huge market, both domestic and foreign, for immunity boosters, for alternate medicine, for supplements, for herbal drugs. And for India to be able to tap into that market, we need to regulate these medicines better. We need a regulatory body which, if it gives its approval, makes people feel that they can trust these medicines, that there is no spurious material in them. So on the one hand, that there is quality control. And on the other, if a company is claiming that it has certain benefits, then we should be comfortable that in some way, through rather than just the traditional ways of, this is time tested and my grandmother used to take it, but in some way for new markets, for markets in the US, in Europe, in Australia, where people do want to take these drugs and where there is demand for it, in those markets as well, we are able to demonstrate that these drugs are effective. So I think this need for regulation, whenever there is asymmetric information, wherever people want that, okay, the government should play this role, there is a need for regulation. You see that there is a regulator for pharmaceuticals all over the world. There is a regulator for allopathic medicine. And the point I make, and my co-author and I, Shubho Roy and I, make in this column is that you need to do better regulation, not merely to protect the consumer, but if you want the producers, the companies, Ayurveda as a system to be promoted and protected, then you need to improve the regulatory institutions in this space.
The column Ela is talking about is Elanomics, which is published on ThePrint.in on Friday mornings. You will see it in the description of the video also. Please do read it. The column Ela makes a point. Actually, it mentions a figure that Ayurveda is a 300 billion rupee industry, or that is about 30,000 crores, right? That's not a small sum. That's a huge industry, but it is also a widely diffused and dispersed industry. And you make this very strong point that it needs a regulation. Why has this regulation not been put in place until now?
Well, this is true for most traditional medicines. So, for example, for Tibetan medicines, for Chinese medicines, what has slowly been realized, and that too, particularly in the modern age where we don't know the person who is producing the medicine, that there is a lack of trust. And that lack of trust needs to be overcome through modern methods, which is basically that the government steps in and sets up a regulator. Sometimes it could be a self-regulatory organization of the producers themselves, actually. So you see that in the case of, say, the mutual fund industry or chartered accountants, so in different sectors, you do see that there is a need for regulation when, for example, there is market failure due to asymmetric information or due to externalities. And in this case, in the space of pharmaceuticals, there is asymmetric information. So if there is a fraudulent producer who tries to use steroids or maybe some banned chemicals, or does not use the right method to produce a certain Ayurvedic medicine, or doesn't put adequate amounts, for them to be effective, then you do need a regulator, because the regulator is able to give a stamp of quality. Now, you asked me, why did this not happen before and why is it happening now? I think because at the moment there is a felt need and a demand, and people feel that, none of the very few of the traditional medicines, or sorry, very few of the allopathic medicines, we are getting some now, but they're limited, and people feel the need for immunity boosters, and people feel the need for a medicine when they're not able to see one very clearly. And this increase in demand has brought greater focus, and I think it's a very, very positive direction, because this is the first time where we have seen, at least as far as we see in recent years, that instead of just saying that the government is going to promote various schemes, cultivation of herbs along the Ganges under the Atmanirbhar program, or where the government is saying that it is going to promote the sale of or the distribution of Ayurvedic medicines through the Jan Aushadhi program, or other health, both at the state level and the central level, where it's not just a question of promoting, where the government has also stepped in and said, hey, if you are not doing things fairly, if there is an element of either cheating, or if there is an element of non-transparency, or if there is an element of false claims, then the government may have a role to play. And in some ways, this is a healthy development, because at the end of the day, this is what will protect the producers, farmers, and those who are in this those who are honest practitioners of alternative medicines, rather than those who might be frauds, or who might be using banned substances or putting steroids into their drugs.
So the two key points you make, Ila, in which the government has to play a role is safety and efficacy. Safety is about how obviously safe the medicine is and doesn't have any impurities or poisonous substances you mentioned, and efficacy is about whether it works or not. Do you think the government can play that role and do this, or do you think it needs external regulators to come into play here?
See, usually what the government does in such spaces, think about FSSAI, okay? Now, if there is, or the US FDA, now, as a very first step, the question is there something harmful in what you are putting in? I mean, even if it is completely ineffective, even if it's a placebo, even if, we don't know whether it's effective or not, as your claims are right or not. But I think kind of the first step is it harmful? And yes, the government can play a role. Usually it would set up a regulator. The regulator would give its stamp of quality. The producers of the medicine would write down the ingredients, and there would be random checks, and samples would be taken, or if there's a special production method, then that would be looked into. And the first and foremost job of that regulator would be to say, okay, this is can be used for human consumption, that it does not have something harmful. And that certainly it can be done, and it can be that as a company, I voluntarily, it's not necessary that we go to the extreme and say that unless you have that certification you will be banned. We don't need to go to that extreme. We can start with saying that if you have that certification, then you go ahead, as a part of the market, and in that you'll find that people will trust you more. Now, in addition to that, if you also want to export, and there is a huge export market for this, if you want to export, you actually need it. And then the government would tell the governments of other countries that, look, you can look at our methods, and we are as good as, so suppose we want to say we are as good as the US FDA. When we give this stamp of quality, we assure your customers that there's nothing bad, and so you can import this, you can allow imports of these medicines. So certainly there is a big role for the government to play here.
So it's all about building trust. It's about building trust in the Indian system of alternate medicines, which is Ayurveda, and giving it the image of a trusted system which the world can use, and that India can be a world leader. Uh, is that asking for too much? As you know, can India actually be a world leader in this environment when everybody is rushing for vaccines and quick fix medicines for corona?
Look, let's not just think about the short term. Okay, let's think longer term, and we are clearly seeing this trend of an increase in demand for wellness products, for health foods, for this whole industry, where we have the advantage of thousands of years of such medication. I mean, when we have that advantage, and when there is a felt need, whether it is stress busters or improving immune systems or digestive systems and so on, which may not be just the need of COVID-19, and may not just be about this immediate context. But now that we've started in this immediate context, then in parallel, I think that once we do set up these regulatory systems in place, we will be able to actually become world leaders, because we have huge advantages. We have natural advantages. The advantages both of tradition, of diversity, of climate, where we can grow herbs, and a huge domestic market. And I think certainly we can be a leader in this space.
We have huge advantages. All we need is a good regulatory system that can ensure that India's traditional Ayurvedic system can be a much sought after system around the world and become a world leader in this. That's this week's medical economics or healthcare economics for you. Thanks for watching this episode of Elanomics. And I want to thank all our subscribers who have taken subscriptions to The Print. And if you have not done so, please do visit theprint.in/contribute and take subscriptions. We need people who value good journalism to take subscriptions to The Print. And please continue watching our YouTube videos and our channel. We will be back with another episode of Elanomics next week. Thank you.
Thank you.